size of the school, their fancy uniforms. And remember what got you here. Focus on the fundamentals we've gone over time and time again. And most important, don't get caught up thinking about winning or losing this game. If you put your effort and concentration into playing to your potential, to be the best that you can be, I don't care what the scoreboard says at the end of the game, in my book, we're going to be winners.
This is the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show.
This is a second coming. This is a call to arms. Your finest hour won't be wasted.
All season long, we played our game. Right now, you're playing theirs. When we step on the floor, every second that clock is ticking, we are pedal to the metal. We run the ball. We pressure the ball. And most importantly, we control the tempo of the game.
And now, here are your hosts, Pete Terrier.
But I have a question, though. Those two foul shots at the end of the game, did you miss them? Or did you miss them?
Not exactly a soup question, is it?
And Dave Haley from NHSportsPage.com.
Right now, it's not about talent. It's about heart. It's about who can go out there and play the hardest, who can go out there and play the smartest. Now, they've been here before, so they're not going to give it to us. We got to go out there and we got to take it.
This is gonna hurt.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show. We do it each and every Saturday morning between 7 and 9 a.m. live on the radio. Two fine stations here in New Hampshire, News Radio 610 and 96.7. My name is Pete Terrier. Dave Haley not here today. We've been warning you for the last couple of weeks that it was his Blackout Friday, as he calls it, and he was not going to be able to answer the bell on Saturday morning. So we've got some very, very capable hands, or lips, I should say, in the studio. We've got from the New Hampshire Sports Forum, he's known as Tuesday and Friday, and I guess we'll spill the beans and say, Tom Zapora, thank you for coming in and sitting in with us for a couple of hours on a Saturday morning.
Thanks, Pete. I've got to tell you, early morning comes very early.
Yeah.
Especially for this show. It's a lot different than rolling around in bed, hitting on your nightstand radio and listening at about 7:08. It's a lot different to get here. But it was fun.
And I understand you had some travails on your way here. You met some of Hooksit's finest.
Yeah, I got pulled over in Hooksett, the great town of Hooksett. And what's funny is every time I've been pulled over for speeding, which isn't that many times,
yeah,
the first question the officer asks is, do you know what the speed limit is on this road? And I am 0 for a lifetime for guessing what the speed limit is every time I get pulled over, which is why I get pulled over, because I don't know what the speed limit is. And I call these roads they should be a higher speed limit, I think, on all these roads that I get pulled over on.
I agree. I mean, especially the highways. I mean, the highways, that's a topic for another radio show and another day, but I'm glad you didn't get a ticket. We thank you, Officer whoever in Hooksett. We appreciate it. I know he's a big fan of the radio show, so we're glad that he let you off. We got John Kesty in here from NHSportsPage.com. Dave couldn't make it, but John could get in here, and he's filming the show, so TNF, you're going to be on camera for the first time today, so don't be nervous. It's real simple. We'll get through it. Adam Furious is our producer. It looks like he's got a little Pop-Tart or something going in there. Is that what I just saw, Pop-Tart?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, you could share with the rest of the group. You know,
dude, I got a whole cabinet full of them.
Oh boy!
Listen,
boy,
when you do like I do, you know, I mean, you got a little taste of it last night there, buddy. But when you do what I do, you make sure that provisions are ready at all times. All right, I got the cabinet full of Pop-Tarts and non-dairy coffee creamer, and we have the whole thing. We have the whole little K-cup system in there. It's almost like being at home. The only thing I need is a fry pan and a pound of bacon.
Oh boy, yeah. If you go start cooking, we'll show you how we really live on this show. It is our first postseason show, and we're going to have another show next week, and then that's it. Two more shows. So, Tom, you're here at the penultimate program of the year for us, basketball-wise. But what a great season it was. We had the championship games that capped it off last week at UNH. Lundholm Gym, great atmosphere. We crowned Trinity and Pembroke champions, a one-loss Trinity team that I think over the course of the season, they really proved themselves to be the best team, I think, in the state, especially in Division I. BG, kind of a surprise challenger in the championship game. The second straight year we had a 7 seed in the final, but Trinity just too much for Bishop Girton. It was a great game, but I think we all knew all along, especially after Trinity knocked out Central and they recovered from that one slip-up they had against Merrimack during the season. I think we all kind of saw that Trinity was probably the best team, and it played out that way.
Well, the thing that's amazing about Trinity that I thought back to even when I was on the Lund home floor, interviewing some players for an article I wrote for another website, was the fact that I saw them in the Queen City tournament, and they looked very, for lack of a better term, very rudimentary basketball-wise. They had a tough time gelling. The backcourt of Rhodes and Otis was nowhere to be found. They just didn't click. Carmen was still having his football muscles. Mabor was starting to get going. Patrick Keefe, as he usually does, he's running around the court, sometimes like a chicken with his neck cut off, but a good chicken with his neck cut off because he's slashing, he's moving, and he's a difficult player to defend. But they just didn't put the pieces together in the Queen City tournament. And I remember saying to a couple of people afterwards, they don't have it now, but let's wait until January. Let's wait until January. January came. They started putting the pieces together. Rhodes and Otis started gelling. They had the Cullity kid who came off the bench. He wasn't a factor in the playoffs, but he certainly hit some big shots for them in the regular season. And they got a lot of nice victories in January that kind of paved the way for them for their championship run.
When you talked about Mabor Gabriel, and you just a little background on you, we met courtesy of the New Hampshire Sports Forum, which is a great website that I really enjoy being a part of. I enjoy going on there and kind of just reading all the stuff, and you're one of the the top posters. You're always out there with some real good thoughts on basketball and even football during football season, with the moniker Tuesday and Friday, aka TNF. And just watching over the past few years a kid like Mabor Gabriel, who I remember seeing in JV games when his freshman season, and watching some of these JV games going, wow, that kid, he really stands out. And then him getting onto varsity and was playing minutes for Trinity over the past 3 seasons. But I never really felt that he put it all together until this year. I think it was in the Bishop Girton game down in Nashua, and I'm not sure if you were at that game or not.
No.
But I remember Mabor just kind of all of a sudden turning it on, so to speak. And I talked to Coach Keefe after the game, Dave Keefe, and I said, look, that's the best that I've ever seen Mabor play. He had, a 20-15 double-double, points and rebounds. And Coach Keefe said to me after the game, he's like, look, I challenged him at halftime, and I said, Mabor, this is your senior season. You're 6'7". You're bigger and better than anybody else in the state. Go out there and get it. Do you want it? And he gave him that speech and said, you got, 2 months left in your high school career. Go after it. Did you see a different Mabor Gabriel this year, especially, after that January that you talked about? You had to have seen a different Mabor than we've seen in years past.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the thing that Mabor fought, especially in his junior year, he fought 2 things. He fought potential and expectations. Other people's expectations. So even maybe in his junior year, if he scored maybe 13 points, had 9 rebounds and 2 blocks, it wasn't enough. I think Trinity people wanted Tunji Awajobi.
Yeah.
And people remember Tunji Awajobi, one of the greatest high school players ever to come out of New Hampshire. Mabor Gabriel, once you got it through your head that Mabor Gabriel was not going to be Tunji Awajobi, and then he settled into this year, I think he did what he needed to do to bring Trinity to the championship and to play within his capabilities. Was he a Division I player? No. Is he a Division II player? Probably not with his body. Is he a Division III player? Absolutely.
When you say not with his body, can I explain that a little bit? I know that you see these kids as a basketball official. You see these kids at the lower levels and you see them work their way up. But you're talking strength strictly because he's just a skinny kid.
Strength, frame. The thing I like to say a couple of years ago in Fall League. There was a championship game between, I believe it was Bishop Girton and Milford, the Milford team that won the back-to-backs. They played their game. Now, those were the two recognized best teams, and they wound up winning Division I and Division II that year, a couple of seasons ago. They left the court after their championship game. Riviere, Coach Morissette's team, came on to practice. They're a Division III team. And it was like all these skinny kids left, and I use the word kids, left the court, and the men came on the court to practice. Calves are thicker, thighs are bigger. You have frames that are men frames, and people don't realize that. And that's Division III basketball. And then you go up to Division II, which is a whole other level.
Sure.
And then of course you go Division I, and then that takes it to the highest level. But people don't realize how much bigger and stronger college players are than high school players. To go from 16, 17, 18 years old to 19 to 22, it's a big physical step.
Yeah, you have a kind of another growth spurt. It's more of a, instead of getting tall, you fill out a little bit more when you get out of, those late teens, 18, 19, you start to really grow as a man.
Right. And I call it incidental contact. You have to play to a lot of incidental contact in basketball. It's part of the game. I mean, people think there's a foul here or there, but no, it's incidental contact. You're entitled to your offensive and defensive space. And so you have someone like Mabor, he's going to go up against a lot of incidental contact. Can he deal with Division II incidental contact at this stage of the game? No.
Especially playing the position that he plays, because in high school he plays sort of that power forward center position. I don't think the center position seems to be disappearing off the face of the earth as far as basketball is concerned. It depends on what system you're playing in, what coach, the style that they like to play. But I think him at the next level, he kind of projects to be a small forward, and he's got the size to be a small forward and a decent one, but he just needs to get a little bit bigger. But I thought the key thing for Trinity is they were able to win on Saturday without him having his best game. He didn't even have double digits in points. I think he only had 6 points in the game. And I know he had, double-digit rebounds, and he had a handful of blocks, and he's a shot changer, in the paint. Teams are going to kind of shy away from him when they're taking it to the hole, and he's standing there with those big, long arms and, good shot-blocking ability. But Trinity won a championship without Mabor having a Mabor game, and I thought that was big.
Oh, it absolutely is big. And there's one statistic. Everyone's into statistics nowadays, and there is one stat that I would love to see come into the game of basketball, and that is a mental alteration on a shot, not a physical one. You have a physical alteration where someone goes up midair, they change their shot because someone like Gabriel comes over with his hand and changes that physically. But there is and you can see it in a player. He's in the paint, he looks up, he sees Mabor, someone like Mabor, he goes to do a ball fake, one ball fake, Mabor doesn't go for it, then he goes to do another ball fake, and then he either travels, he loses the ball, he throws it away, or he kicks it back out. That's a mental alteration. I think Mabor Gabriel, in the games that I saw, and I saw a decent amount of them, he led the state in mental alterations and shots in the paint.
No, I agree with you. I mean, it's definitely, if they can make a hold in baseball a stat, a reliever comes in and he's got the lead and he holds it and sets up the closer for the ultimate save. If you can have a hold, you can have a mental alteration.
But there's one point to that. You're going to have the Bishop Girton people saying that Jeff Lund had 18 mental alterations. Because we know those BG people, they like to keep track of their stats, not to open up a can of worms.
You're flaming, you're fueling the flames right there by going after the BG people. Give them credit. Their team got to the championship game, and I'm sure we'll talk, and we will open up the phone lines at some point this morning. And the number is 645-6161. That's a local number for Manchester. We also have a toll-free number. I know, TNF, how you love the Rochester area. Well, our signal 96.7 is originating out of Rochester. So we're booming all over the Seacoast with some good basketball out there. And we got a toll-free number for them, too, 877-313-TALK. That's 877-313-8255. We've got Tuesday and Friday from the Forum, a.k.a. TNF, a.k.a. Tom Zapora. He is an official in the state of New Hampshire, basketball official, and one of the moderators for the New Hampshire Sports Forum. So definitely an opinionated guy and a knowledgeable guy. And I'm glad to have him in here with me as Dave Haley from nhsportspage.com enjoys a weekend off. Dave will be back next week. Joe Marcellina also from nh-highschoolsports.com I think is going to join us in the 8 o'clock hour. It was kind of open-ended. Joe has been kind of decompressing from the high school basketball season and the high school sports season, kind of like I have been over the last week or so. And he said he's been ensconced in this NCAA tournament. So he said he's going to try and come in here for the 8 o'clock hour, so he might be in here between 8 and 9. We're filming it on nhsportspage.com. John Kesty in here in studio. You know, he's so good, Tom, that he can sit in the chair over there, let the camera do all the work, and he's playing some kind of like card game on his phone. So that's how good John Kesty really is.
Well, I'll tell you, knowing that I was going to be here in studio with a person who has the word great in front of his name, the great John Kesty, as opposed to you last week, I took a shower this week to come to the studio.
I did take a shower this morning.
You did, but I'm talking about last week.
I usually don't.
Okay.
I usually don't.
All right.
That's just because I needed to wake up a little bit. All right, we'll take a quick time out, come back, and I want to get into the Division II championship, and I want to get into how good of a player Patrick Welch is, because you see these kids across all levels, and what that perfect season for Pembroke, the undefeated season, the championship season, really means for the Pembroke Spartans. It is the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show on News Radio 610 and 96.7. It is the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show, Saturday morning, 7 to 9 a.m., both during the season and for a couple of weeks after the season. I am Pete Terrier, along with Tuesday and Friday from the New Hampshire Sports Forum. I like to call him TNF for short. His real name is Tom Zapora, so we've definitely spoiled the anonymity factor for you, Tom, but we appreciate you coming in, filling in for Dave Haley from nhsportspage.com on this morning. We made the call out last week because I knew I was looking for a host, and I made a statement that if Bishop Girton knocked off Trinity in the D1 championship game, then we would go out and get one GNG, which is short for green and gold, which you can tell what kind of fan he is. He was unable to come in today. We understand that he may be joining us via phone. Even though BG didn't win, we gave them credit for getting into that game, but definitely looking forward to that phone call if it does come in from one GNG, because I know he's going right after you, TNF, for stealing his thunder.
Well, there is nothing like waking up in the morning, like I do sometimes, and I turn on my phone, and the first thing I see, and this is like 6:30 in the morning, that I have 6 missed calls from GNG at 6:30 in the morning. And sometimes it's the way I start my day.
Yeah.
And then while I'm trying to start my day, he calls me, and I can't take that call because I need to get some coffee in my system. I'm not going to wake up with a call from GNG. I'm going to wake up with a few sips of coffee, and then I'll deal with GNG.
Well, we'll probably be dealing with him at some point later on. I do give him credit. You know, Bishop Girton did a great job getting to the championship game. Another team that I give credit to is the Pembroke Spartans. They were thought, actually, each of the last few years, 3 years, 4 years maybe, to be a contender in D2. And they have been, and they've had great seasons. But the last 2 years, they fell short of their ultimate goal, which is to get, or I think one of their main goals is to get to Durham. I think every high school team in Division I and Division II, because in Division III and Division IV, they don't play at Durham in the Final Four. I think every high school team that has the shot at getting to Durham, that's one of their main goals. You want to get to the Final Four. I mean, you certainly want to make the tournament, but how difficult is it to make the tournament? I mean, 16 out of 20 teams make the tournament, so that's not a huge accomplishment. It's nice to play in the game once you get there, but you really want to get to that Final Four. You want to get to Durham. That's what you hear. Let's get to Durham. Let's get to Durham. Let's get to Durham, and then we'll take it from there. Pembroke was unable to get to Durham the last 2 years. They had home games in the quarterfinal round. They got upset 2 years ago by Souhegan. Last year they got upset by Co Brown Co Brown, there's a team that's made it to Durham the last 2 years as a double-digit seed. But this year, Pembroke made it through the regular season undefeated. They made it through their holiday tournament in Concord undefeated. And they got to the playoffs undefeated. And they finished the deal. Now, they had some close games along the way. That game against Souhegan was a tight one towards the end, even though it was an 8-point margin. And Pembroke really took control of that in the fourth quarter. But it is very difficult to ask the New England Patriots how difficult it is to get it through an undefeated season. So congratulations to Matt Alosa and the Pembroke Spartans. That was a team that, even though they had a team of destiny, Team Karma going against them, they were still able to get the job done.
Oh, absolutely. And I said from June of last year that it was Pembroke's championship to lose. Now, we're talking before Fall League. We're talking before the season even starts, that it was Pembroke's championship to lose as I looked at Division II. They are a team that's all basketball players. They don't have football players. They don't have baseball players. They don't have kids that do something in off-season besides play basketball. So that was their motivation from the get-go. When they went to Fall League, I remember one particular time I talked to someone who was at the Pembroke Central game. Now, Central was recognized as the preseason number one, I think, with Isaiah Joseph there, no question. Now, it didn't work out for Central. But in that Fall League game, they were the two recognized number one teams. Now, I believe Central did not have Troy Pelletier at that game. But I know
Big difference,
obviously, because he was football. But Pembroke beat Central pretty well in that Fall League game. And someone told me that they looked like they were on a mission in Fall League. And that's understandable because they had everyone coming back. They're ready to go. They were coming off a disappointing year before, so they're ready to win the championship. And the thing that was most compelling to me in all the playoff games was the second quarter of the Division II championship game. Patrick Welch picks up his third foul with seconds to go in the first quarter on a player control at the top of the key on Brandon Len. Huge call, huge game-altering call. He's got to sit for the whole second period. You can see the Pembroke sidelines. They're like, this is it. This is where we win or lose a championship. We got Welch sitting for the next 8 minutes. And Rennie Mahar, senior point guard, came to the forefront. He played like a senior point guard is supposed to play. And he led that team through a big adversity. And I said to people sitting next to me, if they can keep this under 10 points at halftime, they'll be all set. If this lead gets to over 10 for Souhegan in the second at halftime, Pembroke's going to be in a lot of trouble.
They were down by 7. I think it might have been a 10-point game at one time in the first half. Pembroke only scored 2 points in that second quarter. It was 21-14. I kind of joked at halftime. It was 21-14, Souhegan Sabres over the Pembroke Spartans in football. I mean, you'd expect that in football, but in basketball, certainly not. And Pembroke was able to overcome that. Patrick Welch never picked up that fourth foul. I mean, never. And he came to play. You mentioned Rainey Marr. He definitely stepped it up, was taking the ball to the hole. Matt Parsons is definitely a great player on the other side. I mean, you think about that. You got Marr running the point, and you got Welch on one side, and you got Matt Parsons on the other side. Parsons a very, very good shooter. He didn't have a good game in the championship game, but this kid can definitely score. He was a 1,000-point scorer in high school. Welch did it this year, his junior year. He's on pace maybe to get 2,000. He's not going to catch Coach Alosa, who has over 2,500 points, the leading scorer in New Hampshire high school basketball history, for the boys anyways. I don't know about the girls. But Welch is a tremendous player. You got a chance to see him play in big games. That semifinal performance against Cole Brown, I mean, wow. He was 9 of 10 in the first half, had, I think, 21 points in the first half. Just lit it up and did it in a number of different ways, taking it to the hole. There was one play where he was going coast to coast on the dribble and goes behind his back, maybe because he had to get free from the defender. Picks up his dribble, goes behind his back, and finishes, with the other hand. It was a spectacular play that you see in an NBA All-Star game. What a quick release that kid has. He can just get the shot off lightning quick, and it's so hard to defend.
Yeah, the thing that struck me about Pembroke this year as compared to last year, and Patrick Welch being number one on this, is that they were so much thicker in their body types.
They've been in the gym.
They've been in the gym. You could tell. I first saw them against Bishop Brady.
And I'm not talking about the basketball gym. I'm talking about the gym with the weights.
Absolutely. And they were just, Kafani Williams, who's always been chiseled, was even more chiseled this year.
Wow. I saw him with his shirt off after the game. Coach Olosa mentioned that to me. He's like, "You should see this kid." I'm like, "I just did," and I was embarrassed.
Right. And Rennie Mahar was thicker. Patrick Welch was certainly thicker. And I think the thing that it allowed Patrick Welch to do was to get his shot off with that incidental contact that I talk about, finish when he drove to the hoop. And it's just amazing how much thicker each and every one of those players were this year. And they needed that over the grind of a season, because there's some teams that I think fell by the wayside in Division I, one most namely Central, because they did not have that strength, that thickness in their body type for the whole team. And I hate to beat that, but they did go 0-3 in their last 3 games. Central did. So there's something to be said there about having a strong body and carrying it through a 4-month season.
And they lost 4 out of their last 5. They lost to South when they got knocked from the ranks. They were 15-0. They lost to National South that game at Central. And then the 3 games that you're talking about, they lost to Trinity in that big one, second to last game. They lost to Bedford, which to me was very surprising that they lost to Bedford. And then they actually won their first round game against, I think, who they played, Londonderry in the first round, yes. Central.
Yep.
And then they ended up losing to BG in that overtime thriller. But look, Pembroke, I'm glad they won the championship. I really like Matt Alosa. He's a great guy, great coach, and I like, I know some of their assistant coaches, Dave Siegel. He's a Santa Auto Parts guy, so I've known him for a while. Really good guy. Mike Donnell, who actually used to work at this radio station and do a Chat and Chew with the Big Guy. It was a restaurant show. He's on the coaching staff of Pembroke, so I really like those guys. So professional. After the game in the locker room with those guys, I wanted to get them on camera for our nhsportspage.com video recap. And they're like, "No, we need to get dressed first. We've got to get our shirts and ties on." I'm like, oh, guys. So they just, even after they won the championship game, they wanted to present themselves well. And they were so polished, and Matt Parsons and, Rainey Marr, just class acts. And, Welch is going to be back. Those 2 guys are going to be gone. But all the other starters on that team are going to be back.
Oh.
Timbus, who is a real good big man, a developing big man. He's about 6'5", solid. He's thick, really good rebounder, and he can score inside. You mentioned Jordan Williams, Kafani Williams. He is very athletic. I only imagine what they would have been like. I don't think you saw Andrew Hood.
No,
you probably did. A couple of years ago.
I didn't remember him.
But he transferred to Newport. His dad, I guess, lives in Newport, and he moved back with his dad prior to the start of last year. So he played for Newport and was scoring, 25 points a game in Division III for Newport, taking a team that, was not a very good basketball program, and they were 17-1 during the regular season. They're good enough for a 3 seed. They made it to the Final Four in Division III. He's about 6'4", very, very long. I want to kind of liken him to a skinny Tyler Gendron. About 6'4". Tyler Gendron was a little bit more solid. He's not a lefty like Tyler Gendron is, but he had that game where he could shoot outside, good 3-point shooter, but also could take it inside and score. Imagine adding a 6'4" athletic wing player to that Pembroke team, and then taking Brad Rhodes, a shooting guard, with some point guard capabilities, but more of a shooting guard, a scoring guard. Putting those 2 guys on that Pembroke team, you would have been fighting for minutes, but that wasn't a very deep Pembroke team. They were essentially 5 deep, and they had a kid, Cameron Taylor, who came off the bench and played a little bit, but that was really a 5 deep team. And to go undefeated with a 5 deep team, that's saying something about your talent.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Cameron Taylor, because I was just thinking about him. He's someone that showed me some length, some depth coming off the Pembroke bench this year. And he's 6'3". He's only a sophomore. It looks like he's got room for growth, both north and west. So he's they're going to have a front line next year. I'm sure Cameron Taylor's going to replace Persons. So their front line they're going to roll out is like 6'5", 6'4", 6'4", if Taylor grows another inch or two. So they're going to have a pretty tall front line. They're going to have Welch, who's going to be the best player in D2 next season.
He's probably going to average, 25, 30 a game next year because he's going to have to.
He'll have to because of Persons and Mahar not being there next year. So obviously they've got some work to do to develop a point guard. But then if you ask me who's the preseason favorite in D2 next year, you have to say Pembroke.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I'm not ready to say that it's their championship to lose. It's probably going to be their championship to earn next year, which is a big difference than losing. So it's just going to, Sauhegan loses a lot.
Oh, they're losing everybody.
They lose everybody. Cole Brown is usually, has a competitive team.
They're losing pretty much everybody.
Everybody. So we're Lebanon. They're losing.
They got
a
some
lot.
guys coming
they got
back.
A couple coming back, but there's really not some higher placed teams in Division II, from what I see, preseason for next year. And I think the same thing goes for Division I. Division I, it's a totally same thing as far as Trinity is going to be the team to beat in Division I.
I agree. Central, I think, is going to be pretty good, even though they're losing Pelletier. He's the only senior on that Central team. We'll get into some of that. I do want to – we'll take a break now. When we come back, I want to talk about some of the teams that didn't get there. Didn't get to the championship game, namely Spalding and Nashua South. Those are two teams which, very well could have been in the championship game. I think a lot of people expected Spalding to be there. Not so much Nashua South because of the Trinity matchup that they had in the semifinals. But I want to talk about those two teams in particular when we return. It is the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show. We've got Tom Zapora, TNF, Tuesday and Friday from the New Hampshire Sports Forum, filling in for Dave Haley from NHSportsPage.com. I'm Pete Terrier. Quick break. Come back. More of the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show. News Radio 610 and 96.7. Back here on the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show. Just two more of these before we really take the summer off. Last year I went right through 52 straight weeks on the air right here during this time. Not this year. I renegotiated the contract, so we got two more New Hampshire High School Hoop Shows. My name's Pete Terrier, in with Tuesday and Friday from the New Hampshire Sports Forum, a.k.a. Tom Zapora. Yeah, we've revealed him. We've outed you. He is a patched official, New Hampshire. What is the synonym? Is that what it is? What's the abbreviation for the officials here in the state of New Hampshire? Or you have some kind of organization?
Yeah, well, it's IBO.
IBO? International Basketball Official?
Association of Basketball Officials.
Okay.
International Association of Basketball Officials. Yeah. That's the rule book that we go by, the IBO rule book, which is funny because there is a person who no longer lives in New Hampshire. And I think you know who we might talk about. He used to talk about the officials quite a bit.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
He was from the town of Milford.
Yes.
And I think he talked more about the officials than he did about the players at Milford. And it was funny. I was at a fall league game with him one time, and we were watching, and I forget the play. And he was questioning the play, and he said, according to the rule book, that's not right. And I look, and
he's quoting rule books to you.
No, I was looking, and I was like, "Well, wait a second. What rule book? Do you have a rule book?" He said, "Yep, it's on my nightstand at home." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Do you read it?" And he goes, "Yes, I do." And I go, "Do you know what it says on the front of the rule book?" And he said, "Yeah, it's the FIBA rule book."
Okay.
So he was going by European rules and trying to translate it to a fall league game at Riviera on a Sunday morning. And that's when I knew, okay, now I know why he questions the officials so much, because he's going by FIBA instead of IBO.
Was he saying, this lane looks messed up? This is like a straight line. Those FIBA lanes, aren't they like trapezoids or something?
Trapezoids, and then you can hit the ball off the rim. There's no basket interference. I'm like, well, no wonder he's questioning officials. So, but he was good to talk to because he was very knowledgeable. He did get revved up, as most people do in the stands. But it's so funny with people in the stands, half the time they don't know the rules.
I certainly don't. And I sit here, do a radio show every week, and, people say I'm an expert or whatever in New Hampshire high school basketball. I just enjoy it, and, I follow it, and I'm involved in it. But I don't know the rules.
Right.
I don't care to know the rules. I mean, I know enough to get by, but I don't think I need to know them to a T like you do.
No, you don't need to know them, but the problem is you have people in the stands that will yell out guttural yells, loud guttural yells over something that they don't know the rules for. And the most common one is the backcourt rule.
Mm-hmm.
People don't understand the backcourt rule. A lot of people that yell.
You mean like when on an inbounds play going into the backcourt? Is that the one that?
No,
Okay.
I'm talking about, and this is the classic example. Let's say Rennie Mahar comes up to the division line, the center court line. He crosses over the center court line with the ball and one of his feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then he dribbles back into the backcourt.
Mm-hmm.
That's totally legal.
Mm-hmm.
Nine
I wouldn't think it is.
9 times out of 10, people, and they're usually up in the last row, they will yell out at the top of their lungs, backcourt, backcourt, and it's not a backcourt. To obtain front court status, you have to have the ball in 2 feet over the division line. Then you cannot cross back into the backcourt or touch that division line. Most people, they see the ball, they see 1 foot, they see a shoelace that crosses over into front court. Then the player passes into the backcourt to a teammate or dribbles back to the backcourt, and the first thing they're yelling is backcourt. So I'm constantly trying to educate the basketball public about that.
Well, one thing I think that you as officials need to understand is it's an emotional response. When they say that, it's because they want that called for their team. I don't, maybe they think it is, but maybe they think it might be, so that's why they say it. Like when I'm, here's an example. I'm watching a football game. My team is down. It's final seconds. We need a fumble. We need a turnover. All right, the ball is loose. The ball, pops out after, the player is down. He's tackled. And you're yelling fumble, all right? Yeah, it may or may not be a fumble, but it's just an initial reaction. So, I know that's part of your job as an official. You kind of have to be able to phase that stuff out, tune that stuff out. But as a fan, officials and, you guys don't know the rules. You don't know what the call is. I think it's an emotional reaction is what it is for the most part. If they actually had the chance to look at it or whatever, and it was in slow motion or something, they might not react that way. That's my defense.
Well, and that's a good defense. Now, if that person gets up on it, so they're not emotional this coming Friday, next coming Tuesday, next year's Tuesday and Friday, and the year after that, Tuesdays and Friday, well, then at what point do you say they're still emotional?
Right. You're always going to have that emotion, and I think that's the beauty of it. It's a tough job that you have, and I applaud you for being able to do it. It is a very difficult job, and I would never want to do it. We got to take a time out. Adam has said break in my ear about 15 times in the last 2 seconds. There he goes again. We'll take time out. I promised a little Spalding Nashua South talk. We'll get to that when we return. It is the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show. News Radio 610, 96.7. Heading up towards the top of the hour, 8 o'clock. It's always confusing in here because, we have sprung forward as far as the time change, but yet not in the studios of WGIR AM 610 in Manchester, New Hampshire, because on our official clock counter, we're an hour behind. It says it's 6:54 and change, and I almost screwed up. But I know the show is 7 to 9, so I'm trying to get through this. We've got Tuesday and Friday, Tom Zapor from the New Hampshire Sports Forum in studio, filling in for Dave Haley. And Tom, you're probably learning that some of the best stuff happens during the commercials. While we're not on the air, we should probably mic up the commercial breaks and at least post it on the website, nhsportspage.com, in the video cast. Because I told a story about my young 5-year-old son who was a huge sports fan, chip off the old block. Unlike my 3-year-old son who seems to hate sports and tells me, no, I don't like sports, Daddy. I want to watch my boy shows on TV. So 1 out of 2 ain't bad, and I still got time to mold him. So I'm up watching the NCAA tournament on Thursday, and I love March Madness. It's great. And he's all about March Madness, and he asked me to download the March Madness app on our iPad last night. So he's going through and he's watching all the recaps of all the games that took place in the tournament up to last night. And he says to my wife, "Mommy, the Lobos, they got upset by Harvard. It was a real Cinderella story." And my wife looks at me like, oh, my goodness, what have I got on my hands here? It was just, a classic moment, and it made me so very, very, very proud. As, a huge college basketball fan growing up. I don't follow it as much now, but I'm ensconced in the tournament. I'm enjoying it. I can't wait to watch more games today. I'm a Syracuse fan. The bad thing about it, they didn't start till like 11:15 Thursday night. They played, and then tonight, I think they're playing one of the late games too. It says here in the Union Leader that Syracuse is playing Cal at 9:40 tonight. So, hopefully I'll be able to stay up and watch those games. But I enjoy March Madness. I'm glad that the high school part of it is over. It really was mad for me. I mean, I was all over the state over the last 3 months anyways, and it really culminated with a March where I went from Conant and Jaffrey to Southern New Hampshire University for the D3 semis and finals. UNH a few times. I was at Wyndham for a game. I was Sauhegan. I was all over the place, and it was a lot of fun. Two of the teams that I thought, one in particular, the Spalding Red Raiders. How surprised were you? I know we only got about 2 minutes to talk about this, but how surprised were you that Spalding lost that game to BG?
I wasn't shocked. I was mildly surprised that they lost. They had beaten them by 13 points, I believe, 61-48 at the RCC, not too long before the playoff game. Now, BG didn't have Boykin, so that was a big factor, but he didn't wind up playing in that game, too, because you thought he was going to play, but then he didn't play. So then BG was dealing with that. So I was thinking Spalding was a solid 10-point favorite going into that game. And I was just surprised because Spalding had the lead in the first half and going into halftime, a solid lead. And then
they were up by 13.
Yeah, and then the second half, in the first half, they played like a senior-laden team that was ready to go and ready to win a championship or at least get to the championship game. Then in the second half, it seemed like mentally and physically, they abandoned everything, and they looked like a team, a sophomore-laden team, that was playing at Durham for their first time, going against the three-quarter trap of BG, which the only person that could figure out was Dominic Parity, who just happened to be their center. And he was the one who could handle the ball and make the best decisions against it. And it didn't make sense what Spalding did in the second half.
Yeah, it's like I don't know if they got caught up in the fact that they were going to, they were that close to going to their first final since 1964, all right? That, in a historical perspective, they'd never won a championship, and they hadn't been to a championship game since 64. Tim Cronin, their coach, was alive then, I'm guessing, but none of those players, obviously. Some of their parents weren't even alive at that point. All right, Tom, you made it through the first hour of the program. We got another hour to go. On the other side, may or may not have Joe Marcellina from nh-highschoolsports.com and the National Telegraph. Hope to see you, Joe, if you're on your way in.
At the end of the game, in my book, we're going to be winners.
This is the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show.
This is a second coming. This is a call to arms. Your finest hour won't be wasted.
All season long, we played our game. Right now, you're playing theirs. When we step on the floor, every second that clock is ticking, we are pedal to the metal. We run the ball. We pressure the ball. And most importantly, we control the tempo of the game.
And now, here are your hosts, Pete Terrier.
But I have a question, though. Those 2 foul shots at the end of the game, did you miss them? Or did you miss them?
Not exactly a soup question, is it?
And Dave Haley from NHSportsPage.com.
Right now, it's not about talent. It's about heart. It's about who can go out there and play the hardest, who can go out there and play the smartest. Now, they've been here before us. They're not going to give it to us. We got to go out there and we got to take it.
Hour number 2 of the program, our postseason edition of the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show, each and every Saturday morning between 7 and 9 a.m. during the season, and for a couple of weeks after the season, we bring you 2 of the best hours of New Hampshire high school sports talk you can find anywhere. We do it on the radio, on News Radio 610 and 96.7. Of course, that's WGIR AM 610 out of Manchester. 96.7, the news radio station on the seacoast of New Hampshire, Rochester, Portsmouth, Dover. All the points between the Manchester area, really 101 out to the seacoast, Hampton. We got it covered for you. And we put the video cast of the show online. John Kesty from nhsportspage.com. He's gotten a lot closer to me. He was back in the corner. Now he's getting the real close-up shot, so I'm glad I showered this morning. My name's Pete Terrier. The shoes of Dave Haley are so big to fill. We had to fill them with 2 separate guys. We had Tom Zapora, a.k.a. Tuesday and Friday from the New Hampshire Sports Forum in the studio for the first hour. We are now joined by Joe Marcellina of the National Telegraph and the outstanding New Hampshire High School Sports website, nh-highschoolsports.com. Joe, thanks for coming in.
That's no problem. Thanks for having me.
Oh, next week, we're actually going to have Joe back. Joe got back-to-back weeks. TNF, I'm not so sure about you. You know, we're going to crown the king and queen of New Hampshire high school basketball. It's a coordinated effort that we worked on. It was Joe's idea. Joe came up with it with his website, and we announced the winners last year on the show. Megan Green won, and Dimitri Flores, did he win? Who won?
Kamal Walker.
Kamal Walker. All right.
Yeah.
You know, I forget. You know, it's like
It
what
was a year
have you
ago.
done for me
Yeah,
lately?
yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So those guys won last year. This year we're going to announce the king and queen of New Hampshire high school basketball, and that'll be a lot of fun. So we'll do that next week on the program. We'll talk to the players, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, Joe, we were just talking as we were getting coffee and getting you in here that how. You know, as much as we enjoy covering high school sports, and you cover high school sports like crazy, I mean, you're out there doing everything. I'm just a football, basketball snob. But it's kind of nice to exhale after a long season like that, huh? I mean, you must be just totally like relaxed right now thinking, I got a little bit of downtime.
Yes and no. I mean, because even though the stuff is done, we still got to fill the paper with something.
Yeah.
So you kind of, these 2 weeks in between, you know, the end of winter and the start of spring. It's why you hope at times, like with the way the playoffs are staggered in the winter, you look at early on and you say, okay, the less teams we have playing, the better. So you 5 teams that are in now lose. But then when you get to the end of it, you're hoping that those teams keep going because you need something to keep to keep putting in the paper. But these, you look at it, when it gets to be the start of football season, you're sitting there saying, all right, I can't wait for this. You know, I've had nothing to do on Friday nights or Saturdays. You know, I really love football. I love basketball. I'm getting back into this. But then by the time you hit this point, it's like, oh, man. This couldn't come soon enough. I got my Fridays back now, my Saturday morning or Saturday afternoons back. So it's when it starts, you're really into it and it's great, and then when it ends, it's really great too.
I mean, I was sad. I always get sad driving home from UNH on the Saturday, Championship Saturday, because I've just really culminated a whirlwind basketball tour. And I don't know if you feel this way, Tom, or not, but when you're driving back from UNH, in the middle of your conversations and your texts and all that, do you kind of sit back and kind of soak it in and say, wow, that was a lot of fun, and it's over until next year?
Well, yeah, that Saturday at UNH it's such an event. I'm not even going to use basketball. It's an event because you have the 2 championship games and you have that time in between to do things like go to Libby's. And as a matter of fact, Dave Haley, I think he's going to make a request to NHIAA to have the Division I championship game at 4 p.m. next year.
So he gets an extra
so that we can have more time to get ready for the D1 game, because we have to go over half-court traps. We have to go over matchups.
Sure.
And so we need more time to get ready for the D1 championship. So I think Dave Haley's going to put that in. I don't know if that's going to come to fruition. But, yeah, it's a great day. And I found myself this week, and I think my wife can vouch for me, I actually get a little bit grumpy because your system is so attuned. For myself, going to referee a game here, there, and everywhere, going to write something here, there, and everywhere, and it's tough when you're writing and doing the refereeing. It's very tiring, but it's rewarding. And now all of a sudden it comes to a halt, and your system is like still in mode to go, but you're not going anywhere. And then all of a sudden you go, okay, why am I going? I'm not going somewhere this Tuesday night at 7:00. Oh, there's no games. That's right. And then so I get a little bit grumpy. But I'm in the grumpy decompression stage, so it's okay.
You mentioned about your writing, and I forgot to mention this earlier. You do a great job writing for Jeremy Levier's site, nhnotebook.com, under the moniker Tuesday and Friday. So if you've seen that work on Jeremy's website, that's him. We're talking to him on the radio, and good stuff. I wanted to talk to you, Joe, a little bit because, your job with the National Telegraph, you cover those Nashua area teams. And a team that I thought, had all the pieces. Maybe they lacked a little depth in the front line. I'm talking about the Nashua South Panthers. I mean, they played a tremendous game against Trinity in the Final Four. And had they been matched up with BG or Spalding or whoever, they might have been in the championship game, but they ran into the eventual champion. But I really thought that Nashua South team, this edition of the Nashua South team, was the best Nashua team in a long time because they had the outstanding point guard in Tim Preston. They had the outstanding big man in Jack Preston. And then they had another third guy who was also a big man in Dave Dunham. To me, that was a team that if there was one year that South was going to, win a championship, it was this year. And I don't know that that's going to happen next year, but let's talk about this year. Was that your opinion as well, that they were a real solid team and probably you would have, before the season started and after the season was completed, the regular season, if you'd said which Nashua team has a shot to make it to the championship game, you probably would have said South.
Well, I mean, knowing what North was bringing back, I mean, North was decimated by graduation last year. I mean, I don't think they returned anybody. They returned one player, I think, from their rotation from last year. Yeah. Looking at South, I mean, this team that they had this year, I mean, it had to be the best since the split, and definitely since they when was that, 2002 that they won it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, 2002.
But definitely their best team, I think, since the split. I know there was one year in there that they made it to UNH. That was back before when they had the quarterfinals.
07.
Was it 2007?
Yeah, it was a year that they lost to Salem in the semis. That was one of Salem's back-to-back championship teams.
Okay. Yeah, so definitely, I mean, they're the best team in the last couple of years. And, I mean, if you look at where they were, what, was it 3 years ago that they didn't even make the playoffs? I mean, to go from that and then in a couple of years make it to the semifinals again, I mean, this was by far, I think, their best season of the last couple of years, their best team, and they did have everything except that depth. If you got past that 6th, 7th guy, I think there was a really big drop. They had guys that could come in, give you a couple minutes, but it was just too much of a drop-off. I'm not sure. I don't know how much that hurt them in that game. Unfortunately, because of what I was there writing something off the first game for the paper, so I had one eye on what was going on, and the other eye on what I was trying to do. So I was only catching bits and pieces of that game until the fourth quarter, which was it was a fantastic finish.
Now, how about Tim Preston? I mean, you've seen a lot of talent here in the state of New Hampshire, Tom. He's a kid to me that was just so impressive. That was the game that Mabor Gabriel had 21 points. I think he had 18 points in the first quarter. It was just the Mabor Gabriel show. He ended up with like a 26-14 game, and he was dominant. But Tim Preston was like basket for basket with him. I mean, a little guy, a point guard, it wasn't. I don't think Tim Preston hit any threes in that game, and he had 22 points, and it was all on takes to the basket and ones. What a tremendous ball player he is, and he's only a junior.
Yeah, I thought Tim Preston was the best point guard in Division I, hands down, and him and Brandon Len were probably the two best point guards in the state. And you could argue back and forth which one you take on your team, but Tim Preston had a fantastic year. I was fortunate enough to see them in 2 games where they, as a team, and Tim Preston played very, very well, which was Bishop Girton and Central. And I came away saying Preston's definitely the best point guard in the state. He can do it all. He can handle. He can shoot from the outside. He can dribble, drive. And he's a good leader, too. He makes the other players better. He knows when to kick it out to Dunham for the 3 or kick it inside to his older bro in the paint. So he could do it all. And unfortunately for South, he had to do too much in that game against Trinity, because I said before the tournament started, I thought South had the most complete starting 5 of any team going into the tournament. I picked them to win it. But the thing that had to happen, Dave Dunham was a key for them. He had to score for them to win the championship. Unfortunately, he didn't.
In the semifinal game, he didn't, because he had 26 points in that overtime win against Salem, and then he had, I think, 19 in the win against Dover and the winning basket, ultimately in overtime on a rebound of a missed free throw. But him and Jack Preston, I think, in that championship game combined for 9 points or 11 points or something like that, and that wasn't going to get it done.
No, that wasn't going to get it done, and that just goes to show you they had the most complete starting 5, in my opinion, heading into the tournament, and it goes to show you how difficult it is to win a championship, because they had all the pieces and yet came up short against Trinity, and it shows you how good Trinity's run was, and it shows you how good Carmen Giapetruzzi is.
Yeah, we haven't really even talked about Carmen so far today, and we certainly will. What a season he had, and that 1-2 punch of Mabor Gabriel and Carmen Giapetruzzi was just phenomenal, and it carried him to a championship. We got Joe Marcellina from the National Telegraph, nh-highschoolsports.com, in studio with us. Also Tuesday and Friday, a.k.a. Tom Zapora from the New Hampshire Sports Forum. Got to take a break now. When we come back, Joe, I want to get into the Souhegan story, because I know you're very close with Mike Heaney and that Souhegan basketball program. You did the tremendous series on them, the video footage and the video, kind of diary on them last year on your website. And I want to talk to you about that story with Tony Barksdale and the way they kind of rallied around that and banded together and made it to the championship game and almost beat Pembroke and ruined their perfect season. So when we come back, we'll talk about that story with Joe Marcellina and TNF Tom Zapora from the New Hampshire Sports Forum. I'm Pete Terrier. It's the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show, News Radio 610 and 96.7. A little bit of a hidden gem coming back from the break. A little Queensryche. I bet you Dave Haley would like this one. I know he's a 80s hair metal guy.
Dave Haley right now is probably listening to the show going, oh, why couldn't I be there for this?
Great song, Queensryche. What's the song called?
City Woman.
Jet City Woman, yes. And Silent Lucidity, the other big Queensryche hit.
Yeah, or anything off of Operation Mindcrime.
Exactly.
That album was phenomenal.
Didn't they play at Hampton Beach Casino a couple of years ago?
We don't talk about that.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
That's a sore subject with this station.
Oh, boy. I don't remember. That's the voice of Adam Furious, our producer and nighttime DJ on Rock 101, our sister station here. It is the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show and sometimes a hair metal show, if you notice and you listen to the program on a regular basis. My name's Pete Terrier. We got Joe Marcellina from nh-highschoolsports.com and the National Telegraph, a little part-time gig for him at the Telegraph.
Right, yeah.
And we've got Tom Zapora Tuesday and Friday from the New Hampshire Sports Forum. And Joe, we mentioned about the Souhegan story, and you followed this team very closely over the years, and I'm sure that whole story kind of hit close to you, and it really was an inspirational story to me. I think Souhegan underachieved during the regular season. They were 11-7, and that was good enough for the 7th seed. But I think a lot of people before the season started, if you said, hey, it's going to be Pembroke and Souhegan in the championship game, they'd say, okay, I could see that. And that's the way it worked out. But it was kind of a strange trip to get there for Souhegan. Tony Barksdale, passing away 3 weeks ago today, actually, was a student down at Boston University, a freshman, I think in the engineering program down there, and was a player for the basketball team, Mike Heaney's team, and also the football team, Mike Bellevue's team. And that really hit that community hard when he passed away. Untimely death, obviously, as a youngster, only 19 years old. but it did something for that Sauhegan team, and it really brought them together, and it lifted them up both spiritually and on the basketball court, and it was a heck of a story seeing them make it all the way to the championship game.
Yeah, I unfortunately never had the opportunity to really talk to Tony last year before he graduated, but I remember seeing him, on certain occasions. He always, the thing that I first thought of when I heard the news was just the fact that he always seemed to work hard, and he always had a smile on his face, it's very cliche, but in this case it's very true. I mean, he was, and to see the way it affected those kids, you knew that he was a very important person to them, very good person. It was that Saturday, the first Saturday of March, where there's about 1 million playoff games going on, and I read about it while I was at a Starbucks trying to finish up something from the first game of the day before I ran off to the second game of the day, and I think I had a third game after that, and just was on Twitter reading through some of the other kids' tweets, and was just stunned. I tried to think of something, maybe send Mike an email and say, hey, I'm really sorry, but I just couldn't. I couldn't get my thoughts together at that point, and if I had tried, I probably would not have made it to the second game after that. But to see what they did, I mean, you're right. They underachieved as a team this year. I think there were a lot of factors to that. They got hit at the end of last season with a couple of starters getting suspended right before the playoffs. And that, I think, in a way carried over to this season, mainly because they had a lot of players who were trying to figure out their roles. And it took them a while because they had a very, very strange schedule this year. For some reason they had like a 10-day layoff twice in January, and then you add in
snowstorms
a couple
or something.
No, that was without snowstorms.
Oh, really?
And then their schedule was just really weird. They started out with 3 before the break. Then they only get to play 2 games in the Christmas tournament because of snow.
That's right.
I think because of those layoffs and then another snowstorm, they played 5 games in January. So they're looking, the end of January, and they've played 8 games plus 2 tournament games. And I asked Heaney about that at that point. I said, "How is this affecting you guys?" He says, "I don't really know what my rotation is yet." At that point, they're still playing like 12 kids because he's trying to figure out who the best fit was. And you say, "Well, geez, why does it take that long?" But games, practice, it is. I think it's a big difference. The two. So you got to see how these kids react in a game. And if you saw those games when they got to the playoffs, I was at the win out in Portsmouth, the 2 at UNH. His rotation, I think, was about somewhere between 8 and 10 kids. They looked like they'd kind of figured out who was supposed to be doing what. And and like you said, they had a little bit of inspiration going there. They really focused on what they said. Trying to play like Tony, not play for Tony. To play hard, to play as a team, to stick together. And I think they figured that out. That's how they got where they did.
Let me ask you, Tom, as sort of an outside observer, and I know you know about Sauhegan and especially Brandon Len, but you're more of a guy that spends a lot of focus and time on the Division I teams. But kind of following this story, I don't want to say from afar, but from the outside looking in, did you ever get the sense that this was a team of destiny? I mean, when Joe talked about the win in Portsmouth, I don't think anybody foresaw that or predicted that. To me, when I saw them go to Portsmouth, I was like, oh, it's a good story how they're kind of banding together to honor their former teammate. But it ends tonight in Portsmouth because no one's beaten Portsmouth, and it's going to be Portsmouth and Pembroke in the D2 championship game, I'm sure. And then all of a sudden, I see that Sauhegan beat Portsmouth that night. At that point, I said, man, maybe this is a team of destiny. And I asked Coach Alosa, I don't know if you saw in the video highlight package from that Pembroke-Sauhegan championship game on nhsportspage.com, but I actually asked Coach Alosa after the game, when you saw kind of the wheels coming off, Patrick Welch going down with the 3 fouls, you guys falling down and only scoring 2 points in the second quarter, did you ever think to yourself, maybe this team really is a team of destiny? And you can't stop teams of destiny. It's just karma is on your side, and you're just going to go, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can't turn the fate around. And I asked him if he felt that way, and he said, you got to be honest with you. I did. I was questioning whether they were just meant to be champions because of everything that's happened. Did you kind of get that sense ever, Tom?
Yeah, I did, and I'll tell you when I started getting it was when you realized that 2 7 seeds were going for the championship on St. Patrick's Day weekend. And if you're into numerology, this is like you can't beat this. You got number 7 BG, number 7 Sauhegan. You got Sauhegan with the emotional wave of the Barksdale situation. And one of the best images of the whole playoffs was at the end of the Lebanon-Sauhegan game. The buzzer goes off. Sauhegan wins. Brandon Lenn is standing next to David Hampton. They had just gone at each other for 32 hard minutes. They embraced. Brandon Lenn is exchanging complimentary words. Very sportsmanlike between the two of them.
He is a top-notch kid. You know that, Joe.
Top-notch kid. And so they exchange words, hugging each other. Brandon Lenn goes over for the team handshakes, shakes the hands, comes back over to the other side of the court to embrace one of his youth basketball coaches, and he literally slumped into his former basketball coach's chest. And you could just see the emotion in his body. And I'm saying to myself, is this emotion going to carry them through Pembroke? And I'm thinking, number 7, St. Patrick's Day weekend, I'm starting to feel it.
Wearing number 42, which is divisible by 6, and even number. I mean, it was a tremendous run by them. And when Len hit that 3-pointer from deep at the end of the third quarter to put, like, Pembroke had answered in the third quarter, rallying back from that deficit at halftime. But Len hits that shot at the buzzer at the end of the third quarter to put them up by a couple. You had to still think at that point, it's Sauhegan's to lose here.
Oh, absolutely. And in this summer league, I was at Southern New Hampshire University when Len scored 50 points against Milford in a summer league game. Now you can say it's Milford. It's not the big trio Milford. It's summer league. It's 80 degrees outside. What does this mean? But when someone scores 50 points, that's special, no matter against who.
In a 32-minute high school game.
Against your son, that would still be special. So you just felt like he was going to have some type of big year. It didn't turn out in the middle to towards the end of the year, but at the end of the year, it turned out exactly what we thought for Brandon Lenn. And my hat's off to him. I think he's a tremendous player, tremendous sportsman, and a true leader. What a high school point guard should be leading a team.
I certainly think so. You mentioned the Chick-fil-A tournament where Sauhegan got denied a game because of the snow. Were you at that game, Nashua South against Sauhegan?
Yeah.
That was an awesome game.
That was one of the best games of the year, I think.
And that was Brandon Lenn against
and
Tim Preston.
Yeah.
And Lenn basically carried them back. They were down like 9 points or something late in the fourth quarter. Lenn carries them back, hits a huge shot with like 7 seconds left to put Sauhegan. Looked like they were going to win the game.
There were 3 game-winning shots in that game because South hit one and then Sauhegan answered, and then Preston hit the buzzer beater.
Yeah. What a game.
Yep.
I mean, that Sauhegan, they had Nashua South beat in their own gym. It was a holiday tournament game, but, man.
That wasn't a holiday. That had the atmosphere for that game, too, and the one after it. The other semifinal game.
Yeah, that double overtime game.
Hollis was down to was Thornton Academy by, I think it was 15 points in the first half, and how they got back in that one. I think that for them too was kind of the point where they start. I mean, I know they opened the season with win over Sauhegan, but I think after that game, even though they lost, kind of set things in motion for them as well.
I want to talk about that Hollis team. We got to take a break right now, but I do want to talk about that Hollis Brookline team because I think it was very disappointing how they lost in the home gym quarterfinal round Division II tournament. Co-Brown came in and really beat them at their own game. I want to talk about that Hollis Brookline team because they really disappointed me for 2 reasons. We'll talk about that when we come back. It is the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show. We got Joe Marcellino from the National Telegraph, nh-highschoolsports.com, Tom Zapora, a.k.a. Tuesday and Friday, a.k.a. TNF from the New Hampshire Sports Forum, right here, News Radio 610 and 96.7. Rolling up towards 9 o'clock, 8:38 on your Saturday morning, the week after Championship Saturday in New Hampshire High School Hoops. It is the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show. My name's Pete Terrier, joined in studio by special guests. Takes two guys to fill in for Dave Haley from NHSportsPage.com, but certainly a couple of guys that can do the job. Joe Marcellina, National Telegraph, NH-HighSchoolSports.com, and Tom Zapora, Tuesday and Friday from the New Hampshire Sports Forum, NHSportsForum.com. You want discussion, you want avid debate, you want some humor, you can find it on NHSportsForum.com. We were talking a little bit about Hollis Brookline and, with March Madness going on. And Joe, I know you're deeply ensconced in this NCAA tournament. Upsets all over the place. You had number 14 seeded Harvard winning their first NCAA tournament game ever. My son dubbed it a Cinderella story for sure, beating number 3 New Mexico. Last night, Georgetown, a number 2 seed. A lot of people had them in the Final Four. They lose to a school I'd never even heard of before until the tournament, Florida Gulf Coast or whatever it is.
A school that didn't even exist until about 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I think they've only been eligible for NCAA tournament play for 2 years now, and they beat Georgetown, a 15 seed, only the 6th time in the
7th.
It's only the 7th time?
Yeah.
So I heard a stat last night. I was listening to the game on the radio, and I heard a stat that, it had happened, 2 out of the last 3 years, a 15 seed beating a 2 seed.
There were 2 last year.
All right, so there was 3 in the last 2 years, but before that there was only 4 others in the first 26 years that we've had the 16-team tournament. So we see a lot of upsets. We saw that in the playoffs in D1 and D2. The lower divisions, you didn't see that. And that's usually the way it goes. But in the higher divisions, Division 1 and Division 2, you saw it. We're talking about Division 3 where, I was all foaming at the mouth getting ready to go see a number 4 Hollis Brookline, number 5 Oyster River matchup because I had commitments in Nashua later that night after the game, and I really needed to be there, and that was really the only game I could go to. And I was so ticked off, I believe when I was reading your Twitter feed, Joe, when I found out that Hollis Brookline lost to Co-Brown, which spoiled my plans. And then all of a sudden I was pleasantly surprised to see that Wyndham knocked off Oyster River, so that set up a 12-13 quarterfinal game, those preliminary round upsets. You also talked about, you were at the Merrimack Exeter game where that was a 6 versus 11 game, and Exeter, the 11 seed, double-digit seed, knocks off number 6. I think that these type of upsets, these Cinderella stories, quoting Zach Terrier, these are what makes March Madness and tournament play this time of year so exciting.
What's it been with Merrimack the last few years? I mean, it's been either feast or famine for them, because if you think about you take away last year, I think this is the 3rd or 4th time that they've been upset in the first round at home by a double-digit seed. Outside,
Alverin upset them a couple years ago. I remember being at that game.
I think Londonderry the year before that, as well as a double-digit seed. And it almost happened last year. Remember, they needed overtime to beat BG.
Yeah. That was a 7-10 game. Yep. I think, look, both of those teams were better than their seeds last year. I'm talking BG last year and Merrimack last year. I think for me, and I talked to Tim Goodrich about this, and I think he'd agree with you. They overachieved this year. He wasn't expecting that. I think he was expecting a down year. We knew we had Eric Gendron coming back, who was a tremendous player. But to me, for them to finish, 13-5, that was overachieving, and another great coaching job by Tim Goodrich.
It was a great coaching job by Tim Goodrich, because I think people were talking Summers League, Fall League. Flores was definitely going to go back to prep school. There was no question about that. So they were only going to have Eric Gendron, and they were, in my mind, they were probably an 8th, 9th, maybe 10th team heading into the season, and they overachieved. Now, you could say, was it because Division I was down this year compared to other years? Absolutely. But Goody still did a great job of coaching that team. Eric Gendron was a go-to guy, Player of the Year candidate. And as far as losing to a double-digit seed, which other teams do, and other teams struggle in their prelim games, you've got to remember these are 16 to 18-year-olds. And sometimes they might get too jacked up for a home game, whether it be a prelim or a quarterfinal. And sometimes they go out there and the emotion can't play basketball. The basketball body does. And I think the emotions sometimes get in the way. And the emotion of a road team coming in also that plays above their head a little bit, then you've got the ingredients for an upset. And I'm not surprised that much anymore by these upsets. You're so conditioned to it. After watching Florida Gulf Coast last night, nothing will surprise me anymore.
Do you guys see a potential of, I don't see like a 15 beating a 2, even though it happened last year. Dover beating Salem last year. That was a shocker. You know, I don't know that any 16 seed's going to knock off a number 1 in NHIAA play.
No, it's happened in other sports.
It has.
It happened last year in Division II softball. Hollis Brookline was undefeated going into
and they lost to a 16 seed?
They lost to Wyndham, who was the 16th seed, and who they'd beaten the week before by like 8 or 9 runs.
Yeah, but that can happen, I think, with like a pitcher, a dominant pitcher. Right. So you have one dominant pitcher and you got nothing else, but she can just blow everybody away with strikeouts. I can see that happening. But in basketball, I just, that Dover team that knocked off Salem last year, I mean, they had, a star player in Mike LeBlanc, and they had, some solid role players on that team. But I think that's kind of like a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence. So we had a 14 seed Exeter, I think, knocking off Trinity, who was a 3 seed a few years back. It just doesn't happen that often, You see some close games, and they go down to the wire, and it's exciting, but it's usually the cream rises to the top.
I think going back to what we were saying before about Hollis Brookline losing, I think that one was a little disappointing in some sense, because I think they would have been. We talked about when they were bad this year. But when they were at their best, I think maybe they could have been a team that could have given Pembroke, a good game. I think they lost to them by 10 during the regular season. I think if they played again, because they were a team that had what we were talking about with South, a complete team. They had the size, they had the backcourt, and they had depth. And really, if they were on their game, they were really hard to beat, I thought.
Yeah, those two guards, Connor Walsh and PJ Flom, small guards, but just powerhouses. These guys were just built. They were very, very strong guards, and they had, a couple guys 6'5" and some medium height guys. They had a good team, and they just they couldn't even get out of the preliminary round game against a double-digit seed on their home floor. We got to take a break. When we come back, I want to kind of talk Player of the Year and all-state teams. What a difficult year, especially in Division I. You have, 6 spots on an all-state team, or is it 5?
For the official team, it's 6.
And it's hard to find 6 and not leave somebody out who's deserving. You hear about all-star snubs all the time, no matter what the sport. There was definitely some all-state snubs this year, but how can you do the math? You only got so many slots, and they had so many capable players in a supposed down year for New Hampshire high school hoops. We will take a timeout. It is the New Hampshire High School Hoop Show, News Radio 610 and 96.7. Coming to a major Clear Channel radio station event this summer, Memorial Day weekend. I don't know if it's public knowledge yet.
You did not just say that, did you?
Yeah.
It's not public knowledge yet.
No? Okay.
No.
Well, I didn't actually say it, but that'll give you an idea. Hey, I get some texts during the show from friends of mine and fans of the program, and I want to give a shout-out to one Tommy Amin, who was still asking me for the final score of that Dover-Nashua South game. He was texting me, and apparently I left him hanging, and I never gave him the final score. I didn't know just because you text me once during a game with an update and ask a question that I have to continually give you updates throughout the night. There is a thing called Twitter, right, Joe?
Yeah, there are a few people that I know that forget to put up final scores on Twitter.
Well, this guy, is another one who hasn't jumped into the Twitter age yet. I'm talking about TNF from the New Hampshire Sports Forum. He basically puts together this website where people can go on there, a fan forum, but he's not on Twitter. He relies on text messages and everything like that, which is nice, and I appreciate it, and I love all the texts and updates that you give me. But if you go on Twitter and you start following people like Joe Marcellina and myself, at Pete Terrier on Twitter. I know you got like 15 different Twitter handles.
It feels like
from the Telegraph and your own personal and your website. But the thing called Twitter, you can follow all these games, and you can follow multiple games at once, and you don't have to even follow 15 million different texts. But anyways, I digress. Tommy Amin sends me a text and says, he told me to ask you about a specific Spalding parent at a Memorial High School game on the baseline. We got into that during the break. And then Tommy's follow-up text, NCAA women's hoop tourney starts today. You know how much of a women's hoop fan I am. And then Tommy says, Oklahoma coach Sherry Cole's my pick for best-looking coach. Our producer Adam Furious has gone online, Google image search, and you gave her about a 6?
6.5 to 7, depending on the photo and angle. And
so you're not down with what Tommy Amin says. Tommy's a lot older than you, so maybe he has different tastes.
And you know what? I have no problem with the the MILF thing, whatever, but she does not classify in my book.
All right, There you go. Hey, before we got into the break in our final couple of minutes, I wanted to talk to you about a thing that was very, very difficult this year. Naming an all-state team, first team here in the state of New Hampshire, especially Division I. 6 official spots, you say, on that all-state team. I'm looking at Dave Haley's all-state Division I team on nhsportspage.com. He's only got 5 spots. And he's got Pelletier from Central, Troy Pelletier, Mabor Gabriel of Trinity, Carmen G.M. Petruzzi of Trinity, Dominic Parody of Spalding, and Eric Gendron of Merrimack. That's 5 really good players, all well-deserving. But the problem is you got to leave some pretty good players off that first team. The second team, Tim Preston of Nashua South, Jack Preston of South, Jeff Lund of BG, Tyler Livingston of Alvern, and Tong Akot of Manchester Memorial. I mean, if you put that Pelletier, Gabriel, Jim Petruzzi, Parody, Gendron team against the Preston brothers team, Jeff Lund, Tyler Livingston, and Akot, that'd be a heck of a game.
Probably be a pick'em.
Yeah. Tim Preston to me should be on the first team, but who do you leave out? I mean, I might leave Eric Gendron off that team. I don't know. Maybe because I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to say that. Would you guys have that same problem?
It's very difficult.
With a 6-person team, who should be in and who should be out?
Honestly, I might even look at it and just say, well, Preston's a junior. He's got next year to be a first-team player. Maybe that's why.
That's what Nate Mazerel told us. We had him on the show a couple weeks ago, and we said, Dave Haley asked him the question, who goes on your first team, Jack or Tim? And he said, well, I told Tim this. Look, Jack is the senior. He gets the nod this year. And Tim, I've already penciled him in for next year. And, can't really argue with that. But when you look, I just think Tim Preston deserves to be on that first team. I don't know who to put out. Well, that's why it was so tough this year.
I just want to give you a little snippet because, once again, to refer back to the rabid Bishop Girton fan base, I put Jeff Lund on my second team on the New Hampshire Sports Forum.
Based on regular season play,
Based
correct?
on regular season play. And as I've said, it's always been based on regular season play. When our children are here 30 years from now talking about this, hopefully, it will still be based on regular season play. It's never been based on playoffs. So given that, I had 9 names for my first team. And I'm back and forth.
That's
placing
a little
the
great.
names.
9 names.
9 names for my 6 for my first team. I decided to put Jeff Lund at the top of my second team. And I based it on wins against top 4 teams. I based it on double-figure games. I based it on a lot of things. I wasn't just throwing darts at a first-team all-state board. And when I came out with my all-state teams, the first thing that I got grief about on the New Hampshire Sports Forum was the fact that I had Jeff Lund on my second team. Mm-hmm. And I mean a lot of grief from some Bishop Girton people. Now, since then, I've met Mrs. Lund, Her name is Kerry, very nice lady, and I've almost been adopted into their family. We hug each other. The 2 best hugs I've gotten this past basketball season were from Kerry Lunn, Jeff Lunn's mother, and Carmen Giapetruzzi Sr. And I'm not going to tell you who's the better hugger.
And one of them was at Auburn Pitts, I'm sure, late night.
Yes,
last
it was at
Saturday
Auburn
night
Pitts
after the
last
celebration.
Saturday. But it's very difficult because someone that you put in to a first team, you have to put on someone else onto a second team. And people are going to get upset at you. And Dave Haley put Jeff Lunn on his second team. So I'm waiting for Dave Haley to receive some BG angry emailers to his site.
Well, Dave does on nhsportspage.com, he does a first team, second team, third team for each division, player of the year, coach of the year, and then he has the all angry email team, players that could have made All-State but didn't, and angry emails will be written to say just that. It's great. I mean, it's a lot of fun, but to me, this was a very, 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 and we got 2 minutes left in the show, guys, very, very difficult year, Joe. I mean, you can't go wrong with some of these kids. I think you almost have to wait till the regular season. Total different debate. We're not going to get into that here. We certainly don't have the time. But to me, a kid like Jeff Lum, who kind of carries his team to the championship game, deserves extra consideration, and that should be factored in when you vote. But you came out and said you're voting before the playoffs, so I respect that. So you got a pass on that. But I think after seeing the playoffs play out the way they did, that kind of changes things. Gendron loses in the first round. I penalize him for that, even though he wasn't the reason they lost. It was because they didn't have enough around him. But I want my first teamers to take their team's places.
If you're going to include the playoffs, I would say that the kid that really gets helped by that is Tim Preston, more than Jeff Lunn. I mean, Lunn had a great playoffs, but there were a couple of games there where he was in foul trouble, had to sit on the bench. They had other kids step up. Tim Preston, then I think if you're gonna include the playoffs and talk about who you're gonna leave off, then maybe you switch out Preston for Gendron.
And maybe Jack Preston falls out because he did not play that well in the playoffs. I mean, he had some foul trouble too, and he was definitely, I thought, outplayed by Mabor Gabriel in the semifinal game, and didn't have a great game against Dover. I can't really remember what he did against Salem in that first round, but it was a really tough task. Not a tough task is doing a show with you two guys. It's gone by really fast. I told you, Tom, it's going to be the fastest 2 hours of your life. It's over. Joe comes in for 1 hour. He's like, I didn't get to say anything. But, Joe, you're back next week for 2 hours. We're out of time. Thanks to TNF from the NHSportsForum.com. And thanks to Joe Marcellino, National Telegraph, and NH-High School Sports. To John Kesty, Adam Furious, I'm Pete Terrier. Enjoy your Saturday.